South Africa at World Cups. At some point, this will turn into a happy ending, and Dale Steyn has been taking in and soaking in that journey first as, what, a 9-year-old boy when 92 happened? Have I got the count right?
Yeah, 9 years old, yeah.
Right, and then as a budding cricketer, then as an active cricketer, and now as a retired cricketer. And there are different kinds of heartbreaks that come in, but let me start with, the beginning and how it sort of affected you watching unfortunate things happen, say, in 92 with the rain rule, or a little later when you were just about to break in the international circuit in 2003. Did it sort of affect you in any way before even you started your career, South Africa, and what happens to them at big World Cup games?
Not really. I mean, I wasn't ever in the dressing room, so I didn't ever have that kind of baggage, so to speak, that kind of came for me. When I went to the 2011 World Cup, it was my first World Cup, and it was the first time that I was part of a South African team that went to a World Cup.
Yeah.
But clearly that it is something that kind of lingers on with the South African side. Up until that point, there were still members part of that squad that were there in 99. There were still part of that staff that were there in 2003 when the Duckworth Lewis, when they didn't do that.
Yeah.
So there were other guys that may have been hanging on to it. So as a fresh young man going to his first World Cup in 2011, I didn't personally feel it, but it didn't mean that the team wasn't still feeling the effects of what had happened in the past. And for the current players right now, I don't think many of them worry about what happened in 92 or 99. But it stays with the South African team as a team, whether it be in the media or the newspapers and so forth. So you can't avoid it, and you can't get away from it until you eventually win one, I suppose.
Can you go back to the morning or maybe the night before the Auckland semi-final in 2015 and think if now looking back at it, whether it did come in, the sense of occasion or the history that South Africa had, and in some ways there was perhaps we have to break this, and maybe that sort of that pressure that stayed through what was an incredible game of cricket? Yeah,
no, I can certainly say that I wasn't thinking about it at all. And that's just honestly what I was thinking. I remember being down at third man. Morne Morka was bowling. Grant Elliott was, I'm sure Morne bowled the second last over. Grant Elliott was on strike. And I was right where the South Africans were. Russell Domingo was there. Gary Kirsten was there. And I was watching the big scoreboard to see how much I had to defend off the last over. And it really didn't matter what it was. I said to them, I've got this. Like, I was so confident that it didn't matter, even if it was 3 runs, I was going to defend 3. And then went, and the over happened, and it unfolded as it did. And I suppose that was when it really hit me, like that I had failed. I had failed to defend. That was my target or my goal. But it certainly, I wasn't sitting there thinking 99, 2003, 92, all these things had collapsed on top of me. I just thought I'd failed at that task right there. And then immediately started to think, what is my new task? And I took a moment on the field. Grant picked me up. It was amazing. It all happened so quickly. And I thought the best thing to do is put a smile on your face, be the professional that you have to be. And then as soon as I got into the dressing room, the next professional job I had to do was pick up every single body else that was in that dressing room that I knew was going to play a role in future World Cups, to tell them, the sun's coming up tomorrow, don't worry about it. And all of a sudden it was like dad mode kind of kicked in, And then only later you start to kind of unravel it and realize what the effects were that it had on you. But it happened so fast. I certainly wasn't thinking about past South African failures.
Sure. I am going to sort of come back to just the aftermath of that semi-final, but you also played with a number of great South African players, generational players who I'm sure, like we compare with Tendulkar in 2011, there was almost like a desire, we must try and get it done. In other words, that'll be the one thing that Tendulkar wouldn't have in his career, like the Messi moment or the Tendulkar moment. Yeah. Played with Jacques Kallis, with A.B. de Villiers and Faf and Graham Smith. You were one of those great players, but did you ever have that? Did that ever come into the dressing room that, this could be the last World Cup for this set of players? This could be my last World Cup, and I therefore must, try and get this. Did that feeling ever weigh you down?
Not really.
Or did that feeling exist at all? Players saying, I'd love to, win this. This is my last one.
Yeah, maybe. I don't really think so. I think one thing that weighed me down was that I went out of the way that I wanted to play in 2015. I felt like I was going to this World Cup. We had a real wonderful cricket team.
Yes.
And I, in my mind, had kind of imagined that cricket team to be somewhat similar to how Australia were in 2003 and how dominant they were. And I was like, we're going to go to Australia and New Zealand and we're going to boss this. And I'm going to boss it the same way that somebody like Brett Lee bossed that World Cup. And I thought he was wonderful in 2003. And I thought, how am I going to do this? And I was like, well, I'm going to bowl as quickly as he did, and I'm going to knock stumps out the ground, and I'm going to put batters under pressure and all of that. And arrived there and tried to do that. In my first game in Zimbabwe, smacked me all over the place. And I went into the dressing room, and I was so angry because I was like, this is not how I bowl. That's not how I bowl, and it's not what the team needs me to do. So that was probably like the one thing for me, was that after that game, I felt like I was playing catch up. That whole World Cup was trying to be somebody that I wasn't, but certainly never thought to myself that this is the one, you know. But I always thought that it would be nice to win one, you know. Like every time you go to one, you're always thinking it would be nice to win this, you know.
What about dealing with that level of disappointment, which I'm sure is not easy for young players, even for experienced players, but the aftermath of 2015, if you have to go back now and almost have to redo the last few hours, you can't possibly change the last over, but I did have the benefit of hearing from you how it all sort of happened very almost administratively after that, just checked out, had to go to your houses, and before you knew it, everyone was scattered around. Just take me through that time and whether perhaps those sort of moments are important and how you deal with them for individuals.
Yeah, I think we dealt with it in that 24 hours very well. I went into the dressing room and I sat down and I was like, okay, this is where you have to be the true professional that you are. You're a senior player. And I went around to some of the younger guys, the Quinton de Kocks. Morne was incredibly upset and visibly upset even on TV. But I thought, to the public eye, when you're on TV, you have to maintain that professional image. Put a smile on your face, be professional. You've just been beaten in a big game. And you got to take you got to take your losses with your wins and the goods with the bads, you know. But as soon as you get into the dressing room, my next role was to make sure that I picked up all the players around me. And that was pretty heavy. But the next morning was a wonderful morning. We all kind of went to our rooms that night. I'm sure everyone was upset. And the next morning there was a group message, guys, there's a breakfast plan somewhere. We all got together. And it was as if the night before it never happened, you know. And we tried to move on as quickly as we could. But getting together a few months later was the big thing. I think we dealt with it really well in that 24 hours, and then we went home and everyone kind of went their own way. But getting together the next time as a South African team and walking back into the dressing room, I felt like we hadn't spoken about what had just happened a few months ago. And we needed to make sure that elephant was out of the room. And it was certainly still in the room for what I felt was a long time, potentially even a year, 2 years. After that had happened, before we started to address it as a team. As individuals, I think everyone dealt with it their own way, but as a team, we hadn't really unraveled it and spoken about it. And hence why I didn't really play a bigger role in 2019, be it an injury, but
body came in the way too.
Yeah.
How do you rate this South African team that's gone into this World Cup with this kind of form, and do you sense they're somewhat absolved of the baggage, like you rightly put it?
Definitely. I think they're more battle-hardened now. Remember back in, from 99 through all those years, it was one World Cup every 4 years. And then there was a 2020 World Cup that also kind of came into the picture. But there still was only one big World Cup every 4 years. Now it feels like there's a World Cup, whether it be a 2020 World Cup or a 50-over World Cup, every year. And a lot of these players are participating in them. And I think they've learned how to handle losing, going home, getting on with it, and preparing for the next one that happens in a very short period of time. This one, they are, I think, ready as it can be. It's not like they've had that baggage for a very long time. They've lost out on other World Cups due to simple things, maybe a net run rate or something like it. But certainly not to bad cricket or anything that can kind of hold you down.
But then incidents like the one against the Netherlands in the T20 World Cup come along, and now we're in a social media generation where all the cricketers are on, and I'm sure somewhere, I'm not sure if we're part of the problem, but you can understand how these things come up. And do you sense this team is more equipped to shrug it off and that it doesn't sort of then carry on to your next event? Because the Netherlands upset, which was clearly an upset, is only last year.
Huge upset. But like I said, these guys are just so used to it now. There was a period where there was only a few of the guys that were on social media that would get the abuse or, something like that. Now it seems to happen almost every day, and they just shrug it off and they're like, oh, this is fine, this is just another story. Whereas maybe a few years ago, it really meant something. So I feel like guys can handle that kind of pressure a lot better now. And from listening to what Aiden said in the warm-up games, they're just focusing on the next game, the next ball, the next opportunity that kind of comes their way, and they're not really looking at the end goal, which is a wonderful way to look at it, because every World Cup that I went to, the big focus was winning the World Cup. Can you imagine holding the trophy and all that? And you kind of forget about the build-up to winning it, which I'm sure we did do, but the big focus was winning. Whereas right now I feel like they want to win the moment, which is important more.
The world was a lot more insulated in, let's say, the pre-T20, pre-IPL age. But do you sense the association of, say, Quinton de Kock with a Rohit Sharma for the Mumbai Indians, or with Aiden Markram leading an SA20 franchise? These are high-pressure tournaments, high-expectation tournaments, also associating with Australian cricketers who are World Cup winners, or Indian cricketers who have won World Cups. Do you sense in West Indians in the T20 format, do you sense in some way that has also changed mindsets and other things when South African players now play for South Africa?
Yep, definitely. They're sharing dressing rooms with all these other players, these great players that have won trophies and won medals, and they're able to see how they go about themselves, how they conduct themselves, how they train. Back in the day, it wasn't the case. It was a South African way and a South African way only, and it didn't work. It worked well. They got into finals and semi-finals, 99, 90, all those times. But now it feels like they can see that other players also have bad days. They can see what affects them, and they kind of now feel like, well, what I feel is that you feel like you're on level par. You are on level par, I suppose, when you get here, but there are people that have won World Cups. There are teams that have won World Cups, and they perform really well at World Cups. So South Africa would need to win one to feel completely on par. But as humans and one by one, there's no superior player anymore. These guys are making all the best teams in the world. These South Africans, I should say, are making all the best teams in the world, IPL teams and all these other leagues.
Yeah.
So from a playing point of view, the skills and how good they are is the same matched as anybody else.
Do you sense if they get past the semi-final that they will not crumble under, say, the occasion, which is going to be quite intimidating?
Yeah, I think if they win a semi-final, I think they can go all the way and actually dominate the final. I think that would be the mindset. It would be that hurdle that would be the biggest one to get over. Get into a final and they will dominate. I have that feeling inside of me. But it's to win that semi-final. It's that one there that they haven't been able to break just yet. And winning that quarter-final was a big thing for us in 2015 because it was the first time that we won one that meant something to push us through. I think it was the first knockout game that we had ever won. So that was quite a big deal for our dressing room. It was almost like a relief, like a, can't believe it. Yeah. But now we've got to do it again in a semi-final. So yeah, just being a semi and then a final, if they get through that, it'd be pretty good.